Okay. Our next speakers are Atlassians from the JIRA Core team. Daniel Kerris is a JIRA Core designer. Originally from an industrial design background, Daniel has worked in many creative fields, from traditional product design to interactive artwork. Last year's summit was Daniel's first time traveling outside of Australia, so we're happy he was willing to make the trip again. Sheri Atienza is responsible for the brand and marketing strategy for JIRA Core. She holds a BS in electrical engineering and computer science and an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, putting her in a unique position to balance technology and creativity in product marketing. Sheri loves to hike and snowboard, and she loves traveling so much we're lucky to catch her here. Please welcome Daniel and Sheri to the stage.
Okay. G'day everyone, and welcome to Rediscover JIRA Core, tricks that make a whopping difference. We're both stoked that you're here this arvo, and we hope you have a really good one.
If you guys didn't understand that Australian English, I'm going to translate this for you guys in American English. Welcome to Rediscover JIRA Core, tricks that make a big difference. Thank you for attending our session this afternoon. We hope you're having a great day.
So yeah, cheers for that, Sheri. As Danielle said, my name's Daniel Kerris. I originally came from an industrial design background, working on complex systems that needed a simple and human interface. And so I'm really excited to be working on JIRA Core and being able to bring the power of JIRA to business teams.
And my name is Sheri Atienza. I do product marketing for JIRA Core. I want to share you guys a quick story. A few years ago at a previous company, the VP of product came up to the marketing team and said, "You guys should use JIRA for your daily task." And guess what the marketing team said, especially me? I said, "No way. JIRA is for engineers. We don't have to file bugs and things like that." And what's crazy about this is that now my eyes and my mind, and I hope your eyes and mind will be wide open, because here we are promoting JIRA Core for business teams. So thank you for attending. Now let's get started. Let's talk about JIRA Core. Now, a year ago, we launched JIRA into 3 different products. JIRA Software for software teams, JIRA Service Desk for IT teams, and JIRA Core for business teams. So why did we do this? We did this because we knew that 30% of non-software teams were actually using JIRA for their daily task. So why not build a purpose-built experience for them? And so that is why we built JIRA Core. Now, JIRA Core is a standalone product, but it's also within JIRA Software and JIRA Service Desk. How many people here have a JIRA instance 7.0 and above? Wow, that's a lot of people. Do you guys know you guys had JIRA Core? When you guys create a project, you'll see software, you see service desk, you see business. And this is inherently JIRA Core, these 3 business projects: project management, task management, and process management. So you guys may not have known you guys had JIRA Core, but you do. Now, who was here at Summit last year? Okay, a few of you. Do you guys remember what the #1 feature you guys kept requesting and asking us at the booth? Anybody? Could shout it out? No? What? Boards, exactly. And for JIRA Core Cloud, we delivered boards so teams could get started faster. And what we're doing is we've been listening to your feedback. We've been listening to all the things that you guys told us, and we delivered boards. And this experience is going to be much different from what the boards you've experienced in other JIRA instances, like JIRA Software, because we included features that business teams will actually like and that we cater to them.
And don't forget the workflow side of it. So. Yes,
and workflows. So we all know that marketing teams and other types of teams configure their workflows, and they're very complex. And when you configure a workflow in JIRA Core, it gets automatically updated in your board. And as an admin, you can reconfigure your board any way you want it, so then your under review is not before you're in progress. And that's not the only thing we delivered for JIRA Core. We now have mobile for cloud sites on both iOS and Android. So you could create, prioritize, search for any task in your boards. And you can also see your boards, and you could also search for any task for every single one of your projects. In fact, when Daniel and I were working on this project, I asked him on mobile, what does arvo mean? Anybody? And JIRA Core can be used for any type of teams. We see marketing teams using it for the development of collateral. We see HR teams using it to onboard new employees and for candidate tracking. We see finance teams using it to close the books to ensure that all the steps are accounted for every month, and they use it for purchase approvals. We see legal teams using it to ensure that subject matter experts are actually reviewing the documents, and that they use it for searchable record keeping, so they understand when a change was made, who made the change, and what exactly was changed. And operations teams. And operations teams can mean anything to an organization: program management, infrastructure, even medical research. In fact, people are using JIRA Core for even their fishing inventory, and we've seen people use it for their beer inventory. So people could be using JIRA Core for all kinds of projects, for work and for personal. And we have really great customers using JIRA Core. In fact, Lufthansa Systems is one of them, and we'll watch a 10-minute clip, or 10-second clip, I should say, on what they think about JIRA Core. And there's no sound. I don't know. Okay, well, even though you can't hear it, he's saying that JIRA Core is really awesome. But you can watch the video online on our customer section of our website. But thank you, Lufthansa System, for using JIRA Core. But we all know that there are all these teams, but we have an overwhelming number of marketing teams using JIRA Core. And not just general marketing teams, very specific type of marketing teams, like product teams, like the one that I'm a part of, that use JIRA Core for product launches. We have content and PR teams who actually use it to review the review cycles for white papers and articles. We have creative teams to track all the feedback that they get when they create videos and graphics. We have email marketing to ensure that customers like you guys are getting the right messages at the right times and you guys are not getting bombarded. And then we also have track social media over JIRA Core, because why? We want to make sure that what we tell the customers is is factual, and that it actually makes sense and it's on brand. So all of these types of marketing teams are using JIRA Core. So today, we'll be rediscovering JIRA Core in the context of a marketing team.
Great. All right, so let's go through what exactly it is that we'll be rediscovering today. So we have some tips on the different ways that you can set up business projects for different kinds of business teams. We have some tricks on how to use tasks effectively in those teams, like for multiple due dates, which is something that business teams often ask for. We've got some tips on working with your teams and the teams kind of adjacent to you. And then we have some tricks on working with other teams, like potentially outside of your organization. We're going to cover off some approval processes and how to set those up. And then we're going to wrap up finally with getting insights into all of this amazing work that's going on using dashboard experiences. So let's get started at the start of a project. Meet Laura. She's a product marketing manager at a game company, and they're about to release this awesome game called Koala Uprising. No idea what it's about, but it looks pretty good. So she can't launch this project alone, right? She works with a team. Like anyone doing great work, Laura works with a team. Let's go through some of the main people. There's Eloise, who's the head of marketing. She kind of oversees everything. There's Nikki from creative. There's Matt, who heads up content marketing. And there's John, who runs social marketing. Now, one of the many, many tasks that Laura needs to get done is she needs to create a web page for the Koala Uprising launch. So how does she even get started in JIRA Core? Well, that's where you all, the real heroes of this story, the JIRA admins, really come to the rescue for us. Because you could go and you could create a project using the project management template for Laura and send her off with it and get her to try it out, because oftentimes we find that it works out of the box. But we also find that some teams have more specific needs. So how do you go about addressing those? Well, our tip here...
There you are.
Yeah, that's great. Our tip here is to run a workflow design meeting. So how do you go about doing that? Well, what you want to do is you want to grab all of your stakeholders and just lock them in a room. And lock them in that room until you've covered the entirety of their workflow. You want to capture how things get from not done to done. Who owns what part of the process? Which pieces of the process? Are there any approvals involved in that? Are there certain pieces of information that need to be added at certain places along that workflow? And so after you've all been in that room and you've yelled and you've screamed, maybe you've even cried a little bit, you've all shared a moment, but you have this great business resource, this business language document that you can then refer to when you're translating that business language into JIRA language.
And as a result, Laura, Jordan, and the team came up with this workflow. And we have multiple teams working on this. We have the product management team, or the product marketing team is actually thinking of what the website concept should be. We have the creative team who has to, create the graphics and the videos. The content team that needs to write the copy and do a lot of copy editing to make sure that the message is on point. Development team to actually build the actual website. Analytics team to create, to add the tags. QA team to make sure that everything's up and running and all the links work. And finally, launching. So how do we translate this into JIRA Core? Well, let's first talk about the JIRA Core project structure. Well, it all starts with a JIRA Core project. We know we could choose from one of three, the task, the project, or the process one. Then next, we could break this project down into what's called components. And components group different types of issues, or tasks in JIRA Core language. And each one of these tasks may have dependencies, and this is what we use for subtasks. So in a JIRA Core project, there's 4 main building blocks: the project, the component, the task, and the subtask. Now, we all know that we could customize the workflows, and this is a project management workflow that comes straight out of the box. But we know that this team has an approval process. So for this particular example, we've added a step called under review, and this is the workflow that we're going to be using for the rest of this presentation. Now, given that we have a Koala Uprising website project, should we create one JIRA Core project or multiple JIRA Core projects? Given the information that you guys have now, how many people would actually create one JIRA Core project in this? Raise your hands. Okay, it's like about 50%. How many would create multiple? The rest of you, guys, I hope. Oh, that wasn't 50%. Well, anyways, I'll just assume that the people who didn't raise their hand will build multiple JIRA Core projects. There is no right or wrong, there's no wrong way to actually build a project. You guys have to do what is best for your team. So we'll show you examples of how we would do it. So with one JIRA Core project, one of the advantages of this is that there's a beginning and an end to this particular project. So when it's done, you could archive it and put it away. You don't need to look at it again, unless you want to see what you guys have done in the past. What we've done is segment this project into 4 components, each representing the teams that are working on this particular project: product marketing, content, creative, and web. We've created special types of issues for them: web tasks for the product marketing, web page copy for content. The creative, we created different types of web issue types because they do more than just a video. They do different types of graphics. And the dev team, they actually have to build it. So we created a dev task for them. But within the dev task, there's multiple things they need to do. So we created some subtasks for them. They need to build, they need to QA, and then they're going to launch. And this is one example of how a marketing team or a team who's building a website could actually do this within JIRA Core. Now, what does this look like in multiple projects? Looks kind of similar, but it's a little different, right? Because we have 4 different JIRA Core projects, each pertaining to the teams that are working on this project. And why would someone do this? Well, for each one of these teams, they're not only working on the Koala Uprising project, they're working on a lot of other things, like their daily task. Here in the product marketing example, you'll see that we've actually segmented them into components: the Koala Uprising project and one for their daily task. But for comparisons, we didn't do that for the rest of the teams. And instead, we created different types of issues: web page copy, blog post, press releases, and white papers for the content team, and for the creative and the web team, their respective tasks. And you can see this is how you could segment these people's work, but they could still have visibility across these different projects. One advantage of this is that the team will see what all the other team members are working within this particular project.
Cool, so that talked about organising things in terms of categorising the work in the way that the team wants to use it. But let's talk about categorising things in regards to time now. So something that we come across a lot is multiple due dates. Now, within these projects are, of course, the tasks, right? And when we've had interviews with business teams and done research into them, we've found that oftentimes they have multiple due dates against any given task. So they might have a draft date that they need to hit before a final submission date, and then they might even have a final drop-dead date. And this can look really messy, right? So they can have all these kind of dependencies, crazy dependencies going around. Now, to do this in JIRA Core, you could go ahead and create custom fields for each of these different due dates that are needed. But that can be a little bit rigid, especially if different tasks have different due dates it needs to hit. So a good, straightforward, practical way to do this in JIRA Core is to just go ahead and use multiple subtasks with multiple due dates. And you can even delegate these out by giving them multiple assignees. So let's have a look at that. So in this example, Laura needs to deliver the promo video. And she needs to deliver it by a very specific date. And breaking that down further, she's going to need a storyboard, she's going to need a script to go with it, she's going to need graphics, and she's going to need screencasts of the actual product. All done by different people, and all needing to be orchestrated just right in order to hit a very specific launch date. And that's a lot of moving parts, right? So by using multiple subtasks that she can then delegate out to multiple assignees, she can allow herself enough buffer time between review cycles, however many there may be, so that she can hit her dates. And because she's using subtasks in this way, in regards to the workflow, we can make sure that the parent task cannot be moved to done until all of the subtasks are completed. So to do this, we would go into the workflow for the transition to done and add a condition called the subtask blocking condition. And then you would specify which statuses prevent it from moving to done. And how that looks for the team is you can see here there's the 3 subtasks, only one of them's been completed, so there's actually no option for it to move to done. And for now, until Laura comes back, that's it for the admin side, so you can all relax now, you can kick back, and our friend Jordan can enjoy a delicious can of whatever's cheapest.
Or maybe a pina colada?
Sure.
Okay. And so Laura has to work with her team. And so how does she do this? We mentioned that we have features that are very specific to JIRA Core boards. So what can you do? Well, you could filter by team member. You could put in Nikki's name or anyone else's name and see their task. But you don't get to see what's assigned to Laura or to me. You could filter by keyword. So for today, we want to know what's happening for the party at Bash, so we're going to search for that particular task so we get all the details on the Bash party. And third, you can filter by due date. We know that marketing teams are very, very date-driven. And so we added this particular filter for these marketing teams to actually see what needs their immediate attention. Now, Laura is actually on the go. So she has to leave early to go to a weekend trip to Napa. But she could still approve collateral, she could still approve content from her mobile phone while she's on the way to Napa. And if you guys realize that this is not actually Laura, this is Danielle, because the real Laura is actually on vacation and doing this very thing right now.
Cool, so that's working with other teams, working with teams that you work with directly, right? But what about other teams that are in your organisation but are kind of a little bit removed? Like, for instance, the software development team that's actually bringing Koala Uprising to life. So we know that things can get a little bit blurry between marketing teams and software teams. And this is partly because they don't always speak the same language. So one talks in sprints and releases, while the other talks in campaigns and launch dates. So how do we kind of remove this blurriness? How do we let the marketing team have insight into when the software team is going to be ready to deliver the Koala Uprising project? And how does the software team get insight into all of the milestones that are happening on the campaign that's actually publicising it? Well, since they're using JIRA software, it's super easy for us to go ahead and use the issue link function to keep the important things like, you know, when is the Koala Uprising app being added to the App Store, and link it to the marketing task that will be announcing it to the world. And obviously this doesn't just go for marketing and software teams. You can link multiple departments together. The more teams that you get into JIRA, the better, right? So you can make sure that, let's say the marketing team has some collateral and they want to include some information, it has to go through legal. You can link to the task in the legal project, and you just cut out a lot of those conversations that are like, hey, where's this thing at? And another good way to keep people in the loop, a lot of you are probably familiar with watching issues in JIRA and getting notifications on them. But actually enrolling others in issues is a good way to keep people in the loop. And your business teams are going to be familiar with this kind of behavior already. Think of it like CCing people in on an email. Except instead of it being in all these disjointed emails, it's all centralized now in the place where the work's actually being done. And if you want to get this going, just make sure that those two permissions are active for the users that you want to be able to do this. And speaking of keeping people involved and in the loop, there's also approval processes. So Laura and the team need Eloise, who's the head of marketing, to sign off on the big ticket items and other items that they're going to be working on, like the web page and the video and so on. Now, Laura and her team could just email Eloise and get an email back and kind of capture approvals in that way. But for like record keeping and accountability, this isn't that great, and there's a lot of mess in that. So we can just capture this in JIRA Core. Let's have a look at that setup. So in the workflow, you want to click on the transition between in progress and under review. And there, you'd want to add a transition screen. Now, this transition screen should allow the person that's submitting something for review to assign it to their manager. That way, their manager will, A, be notified using the JIRA notifications, and B, can comment in the context of their work. So let's have a look at what that looks like for the team. So Nikki has something that's ready for review. He drags it into the under review column, and our handy screen pops up. Then he just simply follows the prompts to assign it to his manager, in this case Eloise, and adds in some extra context if needed. He could be new to the team. He might have been hired 2 weeks ago, and he can quite easily pick up on their processes. Now, Eloise can view, review, respond, and push this work straight forward from her phone if she'd like. So no more bottlenecks. Now, there's a heap of other cool things that you can do with workflows and transitions that I'm not going to go into here. Like, having specific people having the ability to move things but not others, or maybe you want to ask for certain information at a point in your workflow. If any of that sounds interesting to you, or even if you just want to get the setup that you just saw now going in your projects today, please come to the JIRA Core product booth. You can even bring your laptop along. We will be more than happy to help you out with getting stuff like that set up.
And now on to everyone's favorite topic, user permissions. Who here considers themselves an expert in user permissions? Whoa, I expected more hands. Let's raise them up a little higher. If you guys don't understand what I'm saying, you guys should ask those people whose hands are raised about user permissions. Especially, actually, the real Jordan's right in front of me, so you could ask him later on. So user permissions. We know that marketing teams are actually interacting with people outside of the company. Right? They work with agencies, they work with third-party vendors. Either in this particular example, Laura needs animation for the video. So she's working for an agency. And how does this work today, right? Laura sends an email, the agency sends an email back with an attachment, Laura sends feedback, the agency sends back an attachment, and then it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All of a sudden, you don't know which one's the latest, latest file revision. You don't know what the latest, if the feedback relates to that particular revision. And then you forgot to CC someone. We forgot to CC Nikki with creative. So how can you do this? How can we make this more efficient? Well, we could do this within JIRA Core. And this is why I bring up user permissions, because you could actually, the agency could actually work with the marketing team within JIRA Core, but we'll actually limit some of their access. Now, everyone familiar with user groups, correct? User groups are global, and this is a way to segment users so to give them specific permissions within your projects. In this particular example, we have 2 user groups. User group A that can browse, create, and comment on projects 1, 2, and 3. And we've limited user group B so they can only browse project 2. Now, how do we connect these user groups to the project? Permission schemes. We're going to keep this high level, but permission schemes here associate the user group with a particular project. Again, permission schemes are global. So for project 1, we have a permission scheme A, which associates them with user group A. Project 2 uses permission scheme B and associates that with both user group A and B, and you see that project 1 and 3 have the same kind of configuration. Again, user groups are global. Now, how about if you want to restrict things within the project setting, right? There are things called project role. In this example, we have assigned Laura a project role admin for project 1, and Eloise the project role admin for project 2 and project 3. But this is only limited within this particular project. But no, you could actually be an admin for more than one project. So user groups and permission schemes are global, while project roles are only limited within that project. So how does this relate to client view? Well, we'll use the same methodology. We have user group M, which is the marketing team that Laura's working on, that could browse and create and comment on the project. And we have user group X, that's the external group, the agency. And we created a permission scheme called X. Now, with the Koala Uprising project that we created, we associated that with permission scheme X, which is associated with both user groups M and X. And then for the project role, we've assigned the external agency that could only browse and comment on the project. So therefore, all the comments and the feedback and the attachments are all within JIRA Core, and you don't have to search for your emails and not know what the latest revision is. We'll keep everything within JIRA Core so everyone has visibility into what's happening within the particular project. And that's how you could use JIRA Core for client views.
Awesome, thanks Sheri, riveting stuff. So how does Laura and the team, and really any stakeholders that are involved, get insight into all of this awesome work that's going on? Well, they use dashboards, of course. Can you show the dashboards? Awesome. So for those of you that are familiar with dashboards, that's great. For those of you that aren't, that's a real shame, because dashboards are really awesome. They're basically live reports, and they're composed of gadgets, and you have a library of gadgets that you can choose from. And you can mix and match these gadgets with different types of information. So in the example that we've got going here, they're using a pie chart in order to get a kind of glanceable view into the health of their project. So they see what's to do, what's done, what's still under review, and what's in progress. And they can kind of get a gut feel for, hey, we've got a lot of stuff that's in progress. We've got too much on our plate. Now, the other thing that's really important to this team is due dates, of course, which we've covered. So they're using the calendar gadget in order to see how they're tracking against time. And again, there's kind of a gut feel component to this too. Like, have we committed to deliver everything at the end of the month? Or do we have 6 things due on one day? And finally, using customizable filters in JIRA and matching them up with gadgets, you can get insight into almost any aspect of a project. So when Sheri was talking earlier about setting up business projects and using components to break out streams of work, you can surface and slice that data here. You could have a gadget per stream of work if you'd like. And dashboards, you can have multiple of them, and you can also share them out with people. So if you wanted to create a dashboard for the management team and a dashboard for the individual contributors and share them out with the relevant people, you can do that. So what's next for us? Well, we're going to continue listening to what business teams have to say. So a bit of homework for everyone here. If you have an instance past 7.0, then you have business projects. Create them, get people using them, and there's a feedback button on the board. So if we can get feedback coming through there, it's going to be good.
And we underscore that we are reading all your feedback. We've actually have the devs even reading your feedback. What is pretty unique to us is that we actually have people responding in like, why are there no sprints? Why can't I release on my JIRA Core board? Well, because you're asking for features that are more software oriented. So if you're a software team using JIRA Core and you're looking for sprints or releases, we highly encourage you to use JIRA software, because that's the software that was made for software teams. And so when we're listening and reading all your feedback, we're specifically looking for marketing teams, HR teams, operations teams, finance teams, legal teams, all the other teams, because the other teams like software and IT, they have the JIRA that's made for them. And so we're actually reading all your feedback and ensuring that the product that we create is for business teams.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. One thing, an example of that is we noticed with business teams that they're not doing sprints or releases, so when they were using a board, their done column just got really long over time. And so we actually shipped a feature just for the JIRA Core boards that will declutter the board by automatically removing things from the done column over a period of time. So please send through feedback. And yeah, I almost forgot about the add-ons and integrations. So for anyone that wants extra features and enhancements for your products now, please remember that the JIRA Marketplace is an absolute treasure trove of add-ons and integrations that can get your teams getting things done, but can also integrate with tools that they may already be using. So it might help transition people into JIRA Core.
Treasure trove, huh? So you guys have learned a treasure trove of takeaways today. For tips, you guys learned how to do a workflow design meeting. I cannot stress enough how this is a really good tip to do with your teams. Because a lot of teams, like marketing teams, kind of have their process in their heads, and they know they have need approval here and approval there. But when they actually lay it out on a whiteboard and they actually look at the process and the information that's needed to move from one status to another, they realize that, wow, like JIRA Core actually helps them lay out and visualize their process and makes work a lot easier. And linking issues from marketing teams from a business project to a software project actually works really well. Because now, as an example, I don't have to poke the dev manager or the product manager and say, when is this release going to happen? Because all I have to do is just look at the ticket. And customizing dashboards. I can't stress this enough how when we were preparing for Summit, I was using this like calendar to make sure that I was able to deliver everything on time that was needed for the JIRA Core booth and for this presentation. And so don't underestimate the power of the gadgets within the JIRA Core dashboards. And for tricks, the multiple due dates. We all know that not only marketing teams have multiple due dates, but everyone has multiple due dates because they all go through many review cycles and they go through many approvals. And so using the subtask to track all of these due dates is a really good trick. Approvals are also a really good trick to ensure you have a transition screen to make it a lot easier for non-technical users. And also client view, if you ensure like other team members who are not part of your organization can actually interact with your instance. And with that, we wanted to remind you that JIRA Core can be used for any business team, and with thank you for attending our session today. And with that, we'll leave it with Q&A.
Thank you, Daniel and Sheri. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading questions from the top of the app. This first question is a tough one to start out with.
Okay.
When will JIRA Core for Server get boards?
So that's a very interesting question. So we just launched boards 2 weeks ago in the cloud. And what we're going to do is observe and track and look at the interaction that the users are interactions with the board, and apply that to the server instance. So we're going to observe what you guys do on the cloud and relay that into the server portion.
Awesome. How do you have multiple team members assigned to a task?
So yeah, you cannot actually do that in JIRA Core. So there's only ever one assignee for any given task. And that kind of is a bit of an opinionated thing in the sense that we believe that one person should always be the owner, right? Typically when you have a group of people owning something, it's kind of the responsibility gets dispersed. So it's good to have one owner. I would say probably make use of enrolling people as watchers. That's probably the best way that you can get into that. You could go again and add custom fields that are people in order to get, if you want to represent a team of people on a task. But I would go ahead and use watchers.
Either watchers or subtask. Yeah, because then, if there's 5 people responsible for one task, guess what? Those 5 people are going to think that the other 4 are responsible for that task. But if 5 people have different tasks, the subtask would probably be the best bet. Yep.
Can a template be created for processes that need to be done over and over, such as a release checklist?
A release checklist almost sounds like a software issue, but I'll answer the question is that when you create a project, you could actually create a shared configuration. So different projects can share the same template configuration. Hope that answers your question. If you have 7.0 and above, that is.
What happens when your separate teams, as in content creative, et cetera, have their own workflows?
Oh, so in the example that I had, we had 4 different project management, 4 different JIRA Core projects, each pertaining to each team. Each one of those teams, or each one of those projects, could have their own workflow. So they don't have, you could have a different one for every single project. Yep.
Yeah. If you went down the components track, then they would all need to use the same workflow, because it's worth noting that for JIRA Core projects, the board works off just one workflow. And that's based on the fact that we found that many teams, often the business teams that we were talking with, they just had the one workflow. And so in order to kind of remove some of the configuration complexity, we kept it to just the one workflow.
Can you report on subtask due dates like you would be able to if you had separate custom fields for each?
I believe you could do that via custom filter. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd still be able to
So
slice them. I'm not sure if this is you're kind of plugging them all into a report at once versus...
Yeah, or if you're creating a filter, you could actually surface that on the dashboard. If I'm hoping I'm answering that question correctly.
Yeah, I think the only reason that, because having custom fields for the due dates is a totally valid way to go. The only reason I wouldn't do that is if having multiple due dates is kind of ad hoc per task. It's not a repeatable process where you always have one review cycle and then a submission. If it's a bit more ad hoc and some things need 3 review cycles or whatever, then I would go with the subtask route.
Does Portfolio for JIRA integrate with JIRA Core?
It does, actually. Portfolio for JIRA does interact well with JIRA Core. You could actually create hierarchies within Portfolio for JIRA, because some of those hierarchies, that you guys are used to in software, like Epic Stories, and don't really exist in JIRA Core. So if you need more of a hierarchy type look, you could actually create that in Portfolio. And all you have to do is, when you're setting it up, you just choose the project and choose a JIRA Core project.
Any plans to make a service desk project template geared to business teams?
We would have to ask the service desk team on that. I don't have an answer, but we'll get back to you. We'll ask the service desk team.
What does the content within your tickets look like? For example, a script for a video. Do you link to a Confluence page, or is the work done in JIRA?
So actually, that's a really good question. Different types of creatives could have many different types of custom fields. For a creative ticket, when you create a ticket, sometimes it could just be a simple checkbox, right? So checkbox for a video, checkbox for a JPEG, checkmark for a GIF. Now, if in this terms for a video, yes, we actually do practice using Confluence, and we do have a custom field for URL where we could add the Confluence page there. We also add, the specs for the video, the length of the video, who the target audience is, where the video is going to lie, the storyboard, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on, but whoever answered that question, I can answer that question in more details at the product booth. Yeah. But we have about 15. I've seen 15 custom fields for just a video itself. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. How easy or hard was it to bring business users to learn and adopt JIRA Core?
So what we've learned is that you guys are the heroes. You guys are the main glue between us and the business team. And what we found is that the better you guys are, the happier the marketing teams are. And the number one scenario where we get business teams into JIRA Core is when they actually have to do website development, because this is probably the projects where they have to work closely with the software guys, right? So when they're launching a product, when they're launching things, they need to update a website, create a website, so they need to work closely with the software team. And we realize when marketing teams are actually speaking the same language as software teams, it makes their life a lot easier. So this is how we've seen marketing teams get, ease their way into JIRA Core.
If I can just add a little bit to that as well, with the workflow design meeting and talking with these teams, something to kind of look out for, I guess, is if they're like, you know, we want this workflow with like 20 steps and we want 50 custom fields and we want all this stuff. And you should really use your best judgment knowing that you know JIRA so well into all, like kind of coerce them into something a little bit simpler because they're just going to come back in a month and want things to be a bit more open again.
And the last question, can emails be integrated with JIRA issues? Some executives don't want to use JIRA and use email for everything.
The whole thing is to get away from email. What kind of question's that? I think, I mean, if it's the manager, what happens with this is that when they get notified, they could actually get an email when something needs their attention. So I think that's what that person's asking, I think.
Yeah.
If they reply by email.
Yeah,
they
not
update the
currently,
tickets.
but that's
No,
really
I
good
don't believe
feedback.
that,
We're really
yeah.
interested in all these pieces of feedback that we can kind of take back to the team and discuss.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Daniel and Sheri.
Thanks.